Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, no one's talking about the fact that the Democrats won the House of Representatives. No. That's not even on the agenda. No one's talking about the fact that Nancy Pelosi is about to become the Speaker, the majority leader. That's all gone. All anyone's talking about is Donald Trump's row with CNN, which kind of almost half makes me wonder whether he was looking for an excuse to have this row. Now, they have been at loggerheads ever since he came to power. And if you remember, last night, we were on air for most of that press conference. Let's remind ourselves of the exchange between Jim Acosta from CNN and President Trump.
I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better.
If I may ask one other question. Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's
Mr.
enough.
President, I
that's
was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President,
that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other
Peter,
question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have...
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
Mr. President.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
I think that's unfair.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible. And the way you treat other people are horrible. You shouldn't treat people that way. Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter, go ahead.
In Jim's defense, I've traveled with him and watched him. He's a diligent reporter who busts his butt.
Well, I'm not
like
a big
the rest
fan
of
of yours either, so
I understand.
To be honest.
Well, it was all a bit of a bear garden, wasn't it? And, of course, at the end of that, a young female White House intern was trying to take the microphone away from Jim Acosta, and he was reluctant to give the microphone back. Now, the claim made by the White House is that he put his arm on hers to try and stop her taking away the microphone, and there are arguments about different photographs, whether it's true or not. The upshot is that Jim Acosta has had his press pass removed. But this antipathy between the two carried on. Let's listen to CNN's Don Lemon, news anchor there since 2006. This was him yesterday.
President Trump is showing you just how rattled he is right now. On the day he purged a top member of his administration and basically threw a 90-minute temper tantrum in the White House news conference, only hours after his party lost control of the House, he fired Jeff Sessions. Except the man famous for saying, "You're fired," for pretend on television, apparently couldn't say it himself. So here's what he does. He orders John Kelly to fire Sessions. He's the chief of staff, something the president has wanted to do ever since Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation.
Now, there's fair comment, and there's what Donald Trump calls fake news. And I have to say, I know something about that from elements of the press in this country who constantly publish things that aren't true. And when you tell them they're not true, they keep on publishing them. They do it without a shred of evidence. And I think since 2016, since the twin shocks to the global order of Brexit and Trump, what we've seen are news organisations changing rapidly from being objective purveyors of news, albeit with a leftwards bias or a rightwards bias, and they have become, and I very much quote, again as I did last night, the BBC's Washington correspondent John Sopel, who made the point that with the complete absence of leadership there in the Democrat Party, actually, CNN and the New York Times are now the opposition. And it's up to a president, of course, at a press conference to choose how many questions he takes from people in the audience. Now, the defence of all of this was very much put out by Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and she made the point that during that press conference yesterday, President Trump took 68 questions from the press. She says there's no way he wants to clamp down on a free press. He wants to have open debate, but that CNN and Jim Acosta have gone over the top. Folks, they're a commercial organisation, and I think when Trump said, "You're a very rude man," actually, to some extent, he had a point. because, it's not the right of any reporter to pick up the microphone and ask question after question. One, maybe a comeback. So I have some sympathy with Trump's frustration. I do understand why he attacks them back in turn. Whether finding what I think is an excuse to get rid of the press pass is the right thing is a slightly separate issue. But let me ask you, do you think the president's attacks on CNN are justified? And if you think no, they're just doing their job, call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think Trump is right to call out fake news and rudery where he sees it, in which case text to 84850. Or maybe you're left a bit confused, but hey, surely a free press is important. Whichever way we go here, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch us on Facebook. We're live from London next. I think he is fully justified in attacking them back. I genuinely do. Stuart is a new caller from Clapham. Good evening, Stuart.
Hello, Nigel. Hi.
So, is he justified or is it over the top, Stuart?
I think it's definitely over the top. I mean,
okay.
I watch CNN occasionally, and I do it more for a bit of a laugh because I'm just astounded at the stuff that they talk about on there constantly. And I actually tweeted CNN the other day, and what I noticed is that if you watch CNN at night, the first guy that comes on is a guy with this grey hair, Anderson, and then they have a guy, Cuomo, comes on, Italian-American, and then it leads on to Don Lemon. Now, they, for 3 hours, all they do is bash Trump non-stop.
That's right. It's endless.
Non-stop.
Yep.
I think, the only thing that actually disrupts them is when a hurricane blows into town. And then Cuomo tries to go down and stand on the beach and look like a hero and make it look like he's some kind of I think that's where he made his name, reporting on hurricanes.
Yeah,
anyway.
Stuart, you're absolutely right. It is wall-to-wall anti-Trump. It is wall-to-wall Trump-Russia. It is wall-to-wall Trump links with white supremacists. Funny thing is, Stuart, it's not helping their ratings, because the last card that I looked at showed that the 25 most viewed current affairs programmes in the USA, CNN only had one in the top 25.
Oh yeah, like I say, I watch it as a bit of a comic channel, in sort of like in disbelief. And you'd have thought, with all the problems, mass shootings, murders, serial killers, opiate problems, people dying all over the place.
Huge opiate problems.
And all they do is report on Trump. Could you imagine, with all the stabbings and stuff we've got going in London, if all they did was bash either Corbyn or May, say, Brexit, 24 hours a day, non-stop, with all the other problems you've got going on.
Even the BBC don't quite do that, Stuart. Stuart, thank you. Ben's a new caller from Manchester. Ben, is Trump justified in attacking CNN the way that he did yesterday?
Hi, Nigel. Thanks for having me. I would have to agree that President Trump is right to attack CNN the way he is doing.
Well, okay.
I mean, you can just take a look at anything CNN have done since his election. They've just, as your previous caller touched on, they've just done nothing but bash him constantly.
Yeah, and did you think, Ben, Trump said you're a very rude man. Now, some people think it's quite funny that Trump should say that, but Trump said you're a very rude man. And there's a point here, isn't there, Ben? I mean, I've got a text coming in here. Trump told the guy to sit down, and he didn't. Trump's house, Trump's rules, Trump was in the right. There is a point there, Ben, isn't there?
I would have to half agree and half not agree with that. I mean, I would agree that he was right to tell him to sit down, and I would agree with he was right to say that Jim was rude, because Jim Acosta is, you can just type his name into YouTube and see the many clips of him being the rudest reporter in 2018.
Yep.
But I would have to disagree that it's Trump's house, because it is the US public's house.
Well, I think as a president, you've taken a question from a news organisation. You're quite entitled. I mean, if Theresa May takes a question, she doesn't have to take another one and another one and another one. She's kind of done her bit with a media organisation, and she'll then ask 3 or 4 more. So I think, his insistence on asking a question, despite the fact...
I would agree with you on that, Nigel. I would absolutely agree he was right to tell Jim to stop, and Jim was definitely in the wrong to keep asking questions like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, thank you. Joe's a new caller from Bromley. Joe, good evening.
Good evening.
So, is Trump in the right to attack CNN the way that he did?
No, he's completely in the wrong.
OK, tell me why.
He's the leader of the free world.
Mm-hmm.
He is the most powerful man in the world at this moment. Obviously, especially American media is quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe extremist. I don't want to use the word extremist, but shall we say,
Joe, opinionated?
Opinionated. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for the help. But a man as powerful as Donald Trump, if he cannot answer a question professionally, not acting like a child, pointing fingers. This is the man who is leading the free world. The whole world is looking at this man. The whole world can see that this man cannot take a question he doesn't like. How many times, for instance, you've done interviews, Nigel? I watched you the other night on Channel 4.
Yeah.
You took really difficult questions. You didn't like the questions. You know, whatever, you know, it was, you know, I'm not a Brexit supporter, but when they was asking you questions, it felt like everyone was against you, but you never turned any other questions down. No, but again, you never turned none of the questions down. I might not agree with your point of view, but you still went forward and answered all the questions.
Joe, I understand that. However, when you're the president of the USA and you've got, 50, 60, 70 reporters in the room and they all want to ask a question, you're quite entitled to take one from each of them and say, right, that's enough, I'm moving on. And at that point, surely the reporter has to respect the fact that the president is going to speak to other people.
The president has a problem with CNN because like with a lot of what Donald Trump says, Donald Trump comes out with lies. Then when he gets fact-checked, he says, fake news. So that part of the equation is quite difficult. But again, like I refer to you, you know, you're not just going to take the easy questions from Brexit supporters. You're going to take the difficult questions from Brexiteers, from Remainers.
Of course not.
And you're still going to act with decorum and a bit of professionalism in answering your question.
But I tell you where I do lose my temper, Joe. Not lose my temper, I don't really do that. But I mean, if I was on a platform at a press conference and repeatedly being asked some ludicrous question, you know, had I taken $25 million from the Russians last year? And they keep asking that question. And in the end, Joe, I'm going to say, do you know what? Go away. Because it's simply not true. And don't you think, Joe, in Trump's defence, that since 2016, he has had to put up with a lot of conspiracy theories?
I mean, yeah, conspiracy. I'm sick of conspiracy theories as well, to be honest. Donald Trump doesn't do himself any favours because, I mean, look at his recent campaign, the advertisements used in his campaign. It's, you know, this is the president of the United States.
All right. I mean, a bit more decorum, Joe, would you say, would be needed, yeah?
Well, again, like I say, the whole world is looking up to this guy. If we love to berate the leader of Venezuela as some sort of nutter, if he was to do it, nobody would be amazed. You know, nobody would be surprised. Oh my God, look what he's done.
Okay. Joe, you make a point very well indeed. Thank you. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 6:15 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. So is President Trump right to attack CNN? Is this justified? And indeed, were the White House behaving well when they've now banned him, taken away his press pass for unacceptable conduct during that exchange with the presidents? Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the press officer, says that the reason they've taken his press pass away is he was placing his hands on a young woman just trying to do a job as a White House intern. Now, this has led to a sea of speculation, not perhaps to mention conspiracy. Lindy in Newcastle says to me, if Trump is right, why did Huckabee Sanders tweet a doctored video that was purposefully sped up to make Acosta look like he was chopping the intern? Folks, you make your minds up on this. Were the White House right to take away his press pass for unacceptable behaviour? Number one, he wouldn't shut up when the president asked him to. He kept on going. But number two, and please look at this, lbc.co.uk, you look at this, what you can clearly see is when Trump says enough, i.e. we're moving on to the next person, the young female intern goes to take the microphone away from Jim Acosta. He refuses to give it to her. There is then an exchange between the two arms. Is it Acosta pushing her away? Now, it looks like on the video they've slightly slowed that bit up so we can see it. But there's a big conspiracy now that it was doctored. What is for certain, folks, is this guy would not give the microphone back to a member of Trump's press team. You tell me whether you think that's a doctored video or not. Lindy, I think you're barking up the wrong tree with that one. As mentioned earlier, Jeff Sessions, long-time senator from Alabama, somebody that I've known for many years, and he was the first elected politician to come out and support Trump when many thought the very concept of Trump running was absolutely laughable. He recused himself during the Russia investigation because he couldn't remember having met the Russian ambassador a couple of times at cocktail parties. I think it's fair to say that whoever the relationship between Sessions and Trump started, it has not been going well for a very, very long time. So Trump's oldest, closest political elected supporter is gone. And, you know, I keep hearing all this stuff about the Trump supporters and the hate they breed, and I genuinely believe the boot is on the other foot. So Fox News host Tucker Carlson, very well-known figure in conservative circles, got a daily show on Fox News. And last night, outside his home in Washington, D.C., and bear in mind, he's a married guy with 4 children, this happens outside his home last night. A mob. You know, a left-wing mob outside his house, and they smashed against the door, they've damaged the door. All of this got up and encouraged on Twitter. I'm pleased to say that Twitter have banned the people saying, please come to Tucker's house and start to commit these abusive and indeed violent acts. But, you know, the idea that somehow it's Trump that's the haters, actually, folks, it's people that call themselves liberal who seem to despise the electoral process, want to overturn results and referendums, want to ban people from speaking at universities. We've got to find a new word for them, because liberal doesn't fit. It doesn't work anymore. So is Trump, and indeed the White House, right to do what they've done? I'm going to ask Frankie, who's a new caller from Exeter. Good evening, Frankie.
Hey, Nigel.
Good. Did you watch the video, Frankie?
I've seen it sort of on the news. I think, first of all, I think we should recognise that I think this is being done to sort of distract from the Democrats' recent success and Jeff Sessions' exit from the cabinet. Because I spoke to a young, sort of reluctant Trump voter on holiday, and he said, you know, he read Donald Trump's books, The Art of the Deal.
Yep.
And he'll say or do something controversial to sort of distract the media and his rivals while he gets down to business. And he passes laws and things while we're all arguing about, I don't know, him, say, retweeting Britain First or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, Frankie, as I said at the top of the hour, no one's talking about Nancy Pelosi's new role. No one's talking about the fact that the Democrats had a victory in the lower house. All anyone's talking about is Trump and CNN. And if he did this yesterday as a diversion tactic, or at least if he was spoiling for that fight, boy, he's been pretty effective, hasn't he?
Yeah. Well, I think Trump's absolutely right to call out CNN for being fake news. I mean, when they, back in 2016, they claimed it was illegal for people to look at WikiLeaks and see what they'd exposed on Hillary Clinton. That's a complete lie. That's obviously fake news. There's heavy bias against the Trump and the Republicans. And when they've been reporting on things like these mail bombings, which seem like a hoax, and obviously there's this Pittsburgh massacre. There's been this. They heavily imply that
that's right.
Supporters, they're all like that.
Yeah, and it's all caused by the hatred Trump has sown in America. And I just played that clip, Frankie, just before I started speaking to you, of what the so-called liberals do to conservative news presenters.
Yeah, it's absolutely appalling. I mean, I think it's the far left that has caused a lot more of this rise in far-right violence, more so than the mainstream conservative right like Trump. Say, these Antifa types, is sort of the people who form these mobs outside someone's house, or who riot at a university.
Or they're in a restaurant or whatever it is. No, look, Frankie, let's just make it clear. There's bad on the extremes of both sides. And that's very, very important. Frankie, thank you very much for your point of view. Robin says to me, no, Nigel, it's Acosta's job to challenge him. Yes, it is his job to challenge him, but not to be rude, not to overstay his welcome in terms of asking questions, and not to refuse to give the microphone back to a young White House intern. Nigel, stop defending the indefensible. When Trump is indicted... Oh, God, when Trump is indicted, you'll look very silly. Yes, Tony, I've no doubt the whole thing was funded by Russia, as indeed was Brexit. Oh, and let's throw in Cambridge Analytica. What other freak conspiracy theory can we find? You know, what is happening here, Tony, is we are getting media organisations putting out a series of baseless statements, which, when they're disproved, you don't see or read a dicky bird about, do you? Who of you know that in the last 48 hours, the Information Commissioner has told us that there is no evidence that Cambridge Analytica played a role in the UK referendum, and yet we had members of Parliament and newspapers saying, my goodness me, they've hijacked the whole thing. David is another new caller from Aberdeen. David, good evening to you.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, I mean, Jim Acosta was very rude, wasn't he?
I think he was rude, and I'm glad to see things like this happening because, you know, when you end up with, you know, privately organised corporations feeding us the media,
yep.
If that organisation's owner is opinionated one way or the other, then the news does get skewed. I think back even as far ago in this country where Neil Kinnock was portrayed as a turnip on the cover of The Sun, you know, by a man who,
No, you're wrong. That was the England football manager. The England football manager, Graham Taylor. He was back in the early 90s, and he was the turnip. He was the turnip, because we got beaten by the Swedes. But Neil Kinnock, if I remember, we're going back a long way, David, didn't they put Neil Kinnock's head inside a light bulb? And say, if this man wins today, will the last man out please turn the lights off, or something like that?
That was it, you see. Now, the man responsible for that is not even a citizen of the UK at the time, but look at the influence he wields. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm kind of glad to see someone like Donald Trump stand up to, you know, a news organisation that's privately owned and has its own agenda.
Yeah, it's a commercial organisation, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And I kind of wish that people would do it here. And yes, there's freedom of the press, but surely that freedom comes with a responsibility that they have to report the news objectively.
Well, David, I think that is fair and reasonable. And indeed, that's why in this country, you know, we have Ofcom, etc., to try, and a very difficult job they've got to do, because whatever... on LBC, whatever I do or somebody else does, you know, we're liable to be challenged. But that's the job of Ofcom, is to try and make sure that there is a degree, you know, of balance and objectivity in terms of the output and all sides of the argument being heard. And David, for certain, CNN do not put the other side of the argument. Thank you very much indeed for your call. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's now 6:30 and time for the news with Lisa Aziz. Is Trump justified in hitting back at CNN? I think he probably is. Are the White House within their rights to take away Jim Acosta's press pass because of the way he behaved towards that intern? lbc.co.uk. You can see a video of the exchange, a video that some are now saying was doctored by the White House. Folks, they wouldn't take that risk. Can you imagine if they doctored a video and got found out? They just wouldn't do that. It's crackers. Now, Trump may well be the devil for CNN, but I think I'm fully justified in saying that I am the devil for the European Union. And my friend Michel Barnier was out today speaking in Helsinki, giving a dire, grave warning to all the citizens, all 500 million of them, living in the European Union.
We'll have to fight against those who want to demolish Europe with their fear, their populist deceit, their attacks against the European project. There is no Farage in every country. In every country.
Oh, my goodness me. There's now a Farage in every country. Get the kids in. Don't let them play outside. It's like old Napoleon. Old Boney is coming to get you. And they're terrified. But they're not really terrified of me. They're terrified of the phenomenon. You see, whilst we worry about Brexit and all, you know, we sort of go on bended knee and say, please, Mr. Barnier, be nice to us. We'll just give you another 20 billion if you're really, really nice to us. They're not worried about Brexit so much anymore. I mean, they're concerned about it. They've got much bigger fish to fry. They've got Italy, a government defying them, a government that puts forward a budget, and Mr. Juncker says, no, that's not good enough. But what they're also really scared of now, and I mean really scared, the European elections take place next year between May the 23rd and May the 26th. It's a mug's game in some ways to predict what will happen in elections 5 months out, but what Barnier knows is that on the right, on the centre and on the left, there is going to be a huge influx of new MEPs into that parliament that completely reject the model that they should be governed by unelected old men like him. And sure, they'll be called populists and nationalists and all the names under the sun, and I re-emphasise, some of these are actually way out on the left. Jean-Luc Mélenchon from France, for example. But they know there's a political tsunami coming towards the European Union, but if they use my name often enough, there's now a Farage in every country. Perhaps that threat of this appalling, dangerous human being might make everybody see sense. What fun. Back to Trump, back to the White House, and up to High Wycombe to speak to David, a new caller to this show. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Nigel. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Well, I'm doing okay, despite what Monsieur Barnier says about me, but I can just about live with that.
I know. I couldn't imagine one of you in every country. I don't know where I'd go.
It's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying, isn't it? I mean, although I do remember, David, that when I was at school, my headmaster saying that it's quite a good thing in life to be judged by your enemies. So I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with things.
You must be over the moon then.
Now, David, have you had a chance to look at this video?
Yeah, I just wanted to grab what you said as we come back from the break. I mean, if you watched the video that the White House released alongside the one that was recorded, and you say you can't see a difference, I mean, whatever you're on, can I have some? Because there is the most obvious difference between the two videos. It has definitely been manipulated to look like he's been quite aggressive with her. And in the actual video, it literally, I mean, it's quite ironic. I wonder what they're going to do to Donald Trump. The man that thinks it's acceptable to grab a woman by the proverbials, but it's an assault.
But that was locker room talk, David.
Oh, that's locker room. This was live on TV, so it's just blown my mind. I mean, it's shocking how they can. I mean,
all right, David. I tell you what.
Yeah.
Can we agree on this? That Jim Acosta had asked his questions, and the president said, "We're done."
Yep, absolutely.
And that he should have respected that.
Yep, sure, totally.
Can we also agree that he had the microphone and a young, I don't know what she is, 21 years old or something, a young intern, goes to take the microphone from Jim Acosta.
I'd say
He refuses. She then turns round and looks at the president, who then actually gets much angrier on her behalf. Now,
but where was the assault? That's what we're talking about. Where was the alleged assault?
Well, I have to say, David, I have seen two stills. One where it appears that Jim Acosta's hand is under her arm, and another where it appears that Jim Acosta's hand is on top and on her arm. I don't know what to make of it.
You cannot judge it by a still. You cannot judge that by a still. There are so many photos throughout history.
All right, so let me ask you. All right, David, let me ask you, did the White House doctor this?
Sorry, say that again?
Do you think the White House doctored this?
Well, so yeah, someone did. It's different. It's a different video.
All right,
Nigel, it's not. To me, it's not a debatable thing. It's a different. If you play them next to each other, they're different.
Can you imagine?
Change somewhere.
David, David, look, I'm far from being an expert on these things, but don't you think that the risk of the White House doctoring a video, I mean, can you imagine the damage that would do them if it got out?
I don't think I could put anything past the guy, to be honest, Nigel. With Donald Trump, he's an absolute clown in my eyes. I genuinely think he probably thought he'd get away with something like this, but it's so mind-numbingly obvious that I can't believe it's even up for discussion.
Right. So even without this video, they probably were quite within their rights to take away Jim Acosta's press pass anyway, weren't they?
Yeah, that's separate. That's a separate issue.
Yeah, okay.
He was
all right. No, on the video, you're convinced something's been done to it. David, thank you very much indeed. Well, David's not alone. I'm getting messages on the board here from people saying they think it's been doctored too. Greg is a new caller from Anaheim in California. Greg, good afternoon to you.
How are you?
I am very, very well, thank you. It's probably still morning there, actually, but
yeah, it is still morning. I would say you're the devil to Van Rompuy.
well, clearly not just Van Rompuy, but
that's my favorite, at least.
Well, yeah, that was a bit of sport, wasn't it? And they find, do you know what? I didn't use a rude word. All right, I didn't do anything wrong. I just teased the bloke, and they fined me. But hey, so Greg, Greg, do you, as an American, do you watch this war of words between CNN and the president?
Oh yeah, I was very much a Democrat at one point in time, but I tend to switch back and forth between depending on issues and who's doing what at the time. So I'm kind of in the center. And when you talk about liberals, I would probably use at this point the word leftists versus liberals, because liberals here now don't like to be associated with like a middle to far left. They're more center constitutionalists. So it's just words at this point. You know, we still use the word liberal as leftists here a lot of times, but you'll get a.
But I mean, the word liberal, Greg. The word liberal, Greg, implies tolerance. You know, and looking after the weak, and that I think of liberalism as being those things. And here it is. They're standing outside Tucker Carlson's house, screaming abuse, saying, "Get out of town."
Oh yeah, it's completely wrong. But I wouldn't you almost consider them far leftists?
Yeah.
Or and as far as the CNN thing, they have a history of this kind of that you probably don't see a lot of over there. This isn't the first case of this kind of contact. Regardless if she was touched or not, or videos were doctored, it's the contact, how you portray yourself, or the conduct. I mean, the conduct alone, how he acted was enough.
Okay.
You know, I'm not saying...
No, I listen, I don't think, I mean, you know, somebody says to me here, Mark says to me here, Greg, on Twitter, he says, I'm surprised that actually they put up with Costa for this long. He's been trying to wind Trump up for months. But maybe, do you think, Greg, let me just ask you this one question, you know, thinking about your president, do you think he saw this opportunity for a row and he went for it, knowing it would take away all the headlines about a Democrat victory in the lower house?
Oh, you know, as much as I don't want to say it, I think there is some of that, yes. You know, I wasn't there, but I'm a Trump supporter, but, you know, I don't think it was a full-on thing, but there is some opportunity taken there, I think, in my opinion.
I do too. Greg, thanks ever so much for your call, and thanks for listening from California. I'm up to Finchley to speak to Kevin. Good evening, Kevin.
Mr. Farage, so earlier on you spoke about CNN and the fact that they are bashing Trump on a daily basis, which they do.
Yes.
Because they dislike him probably as much as I do.
Yes.
But, you know, if I can remember when Obama was a president, didn't your mates over at Fox News bash him on a daily basis?
Yes, they
did. They not do everything they could to discredit him? And not only that, did not Mr. Trump, take a lead role in the birther movement to try and discredit him and say that he was a Kenyan and not a American? Did this not happen?
Oh yes, absolutely. And what you see, and Kevin, what you see in America are news networks that are much more partisan than we are in this country, without that degree of sort of, a regulator trying to ensure balance. But I would say this, Kevin. You know, when Fox News cover Trump, for example, a lot of their presenters are Trump supporters, but they're not all. You know, you will find criticism of the president on Fox News, and you absolutely will. And yeah, sure, they were against Obama, but not obsessively, not hour after hour after hour. And I think the point, Kevin, and I'm going to go back to this because I do believe it's true, I think in the absence of any leadership in the Democrat Party, CNN have become the opposition.
I agree with you, and I think it's just sad that the Democrats haven't pulled their finger out and sorted this out, because they need to, because we do need to have someone to take Trump to account. Now, look, again, I'm going to take umbrage on this kind of left liberal versus right wing. Again, I'm going to say this: which left wing person has recently shot up a synagogue or shot up a black Baptist church? I feel though you would see that it's mainly people from the right who are closer to Trump who will be doing this.
Well, the guy that shut up the synagogue said he hated President Trump. But Kevin, look, I've said on this show already tonight, there are awful things done on the extremes of both sides, all right? And we'll agree with that. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 6:45 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Is it justified for Trump to have a go at CNN the way that it does? Equally, was it right of the White House to take away Acosta's pass, having posted the video? lbc.co.uk. Some people think it was doctored. Now, not everybody, of course, thinks the president got this right. When a president lies in every press conference, how could he shout fake news? Trump was rude as soon as the reporter started talking, I get. Nigel, I'm generally with you, but we part company on Trump. He is a narcissist and a moron. Tim? I promise you, he's not a moron. I absolutely promise you. He was dominating the news agenda. He has managed to make the rain come down on the Democrats' parade. He really, really has. CNN have had it coming since day one. Always confrontational, always poking and prodding. No respect for the presidential office of state. Maxine Thalrock, I think there is some truth in that. There needs to be some respect for the president, as there does for the prime minister in this country. I just don't see much of that. Nigel, it was doctored. It was framed and sped up. You're spreading fake news. No, I'm not. I'm just saying. I find it extraordinary to think that the White House would doctor a video. I mean, if that got out, it would be a catastrophe for them. I'm going to Kingston to speak to Brandon. Hi, Brandon.
Oh, hi there, Nigel. Yeah, so I did watch the press conference.
Yes.
And my overall conclusion was that, on balance, Trump was rude, not only to the reporter, but more importantly, to the American people who deserved answers. I mean, you said yourself...
Answers about what, Brandon? I mean, he answered... He answered 68 questions. So what particular answers do you think they deserve?
Sure. Well, I mean, CNN, just cover that point very quickly. You said yourself they're kind of the official opposition.
Yes.
And as the official opposition, they've challenged him. That reporter challenged him on the inflammatory and, I think, by and large, untrue statements about an American invasion by a few hundred people hundreds of miles away.
And Brandon... Come on, he answered that. He answered that fully and with no particular tone in his voice at all. He just said,
Did he answer it fully?
Well, he said, I called it an invasion, you don't. We use different language. I mean, he did answer that. That wasn't where the row started, was it?
It was
the Russian question, wasn't it?
The Russian question really flipped him, but it was started with him being challenged on how can it be an invasion when you have a few hundred people, which you're promising to send 10,000 troops to defend against. They're hundreds of miles away, and they'll probably start filtering off anyway before they even get to the American border. He was challenged on this, and then he was asked about the Russia investigation. Reasonable questions, and his response was basically sit down and hand the mic over. Now, these are reasonable questions that the American people...
But how many questions? How many questions should the CNN guy have had? 8, 9, 10?
Well, the thing is, he didn't get an answer to the question, so he wasn't rude. He was persistent.
No, he wasn't. No, come on, Brandon. He wasn't. He changed tack onto Russia. And that, and the president said, and before he even got there, the president said, "Okay, thank you, we're done, we're moving on." Brandon, look, Trump's style is, it's an old-fashioned word, but quite raucous. He is quite raucous. I think it's a good word in terms of the way he deals with things. He is quite confrontational. Of course he is. And I did half joke, Brandon, earlier on that Trump calling other people rude. Well, many see him as being rude. And I do understand that. But there is a limit, isn't there, to, if a president takes a question and says, right, I'm moving on, it really isn't.
I get that too. That too. But I think if I completely understand a lot of people in that room, a lot of reporters, all probably waiting to ask a question too.
Yes.
And no one wants to hog the microphone. But, if he just answered the questions in a straightforward way, but this is Trump's style. He'll get asked a question, and then he'll give a statement which is either unclear or untrue in many cases, and he doesn't like follow-up. And of course, any interview, a proper and thorough one involves question and answer, and he doesn't like that.
But it's not an interview, Brandon. This is not a sit-down. This is not 60 minutes. Brandon, he answered 68 questions yesterday, right? Now, when I see Theresa May doing a big press conference when she's come back from Brussels, she takes 3 or 4 questions and bush, she's gone. Brandon?
Well, she's awful.
Okay, well, I tell you what, Brandon, we found a point of agreement, and I'm really pleased to end it on that note. Thank you. I'm going to go to Banstead and speak to Akhil as a new caller to the show. Hello.
Oh, hi, Nigel. First-time caller. Thanks for having me on board.
Welcome. So, was Trump in the right, or was he wrong?
I think when it comes to the discourteous, what the reporter did, because he obviously did answer quite a few of his questions. So at that time and place, considering there were loads of other reporters who wanted to fire questions at him, it was the right thing to do to kindly ask him to, that's it, I've answered your question, time to move on. But on stepping out of that domain, looking at the broader picture in terms of barring him to come back again, that is a gross violation of freedom of expression and press. Because the majority of the American public, as would majority of the people, and the thing with LBC is that most of the viewers, most of the people who listen are rather educated individuals. So you can see the broader picture here. So what if CNN does not agree with Trump? So what if they don't agree?
Okay, well, what about...
There's nothing
what about
wrong.
if they send a different reporter, someone who's got manners...
Doesn't matter.
And shows...
It doesn't matter. The journalist has got their duty of care. They would have to press the question of the day. Whatever the agenda is, they should have the liberty to
But the agenda was not the Russian conspiracy yesterday, was it? The agenda were the midterm elections, how they turned out, and
which is why I go back to my first point. I think Trump was right to tell him to sit down. But he shouldn't bar him. He shouldn't bar him and derogate him the way he did.
Okay.
Because Today we've had 12 people shot in California, right? Tomorrow, the same Trump would go tomorrow defending the Second Amendment, saying how, every American has got the right to own a gun and how he would have not had that many casualties if the security guard would have more machine guns or if the club goers would have more guns because they would have made less fatalities and the Second Amendment is there, out there, nobody should change it. This literally walks over the First Amendment.
Well, look, let's not get too into that. You make the point about Trump, and I understand the point you make. But Akhil, if CNN replaced Jim Acosta with somebody else, I'm sure they'll be allowed back into the White House. I'm sure they will. Thank you very much indeed for that. Gillian, I've got a quick 35 seconds for you. New caller from Croydon. Hello.
Oh, hi. Absolutely delighted to speak to you, Nigel.
Hello.
Thank goodness I've been waiting for you to come on all day.
Right.
I mean, even listening to LBC, honestly, this afternoon, absolutely beside himself. He was completely and utterly justified. They keep saying about Trump being the president and he should be respectful. Well, maybe people should be respectful for him as well.
I think there's some truth in that. And Gillian, I'm going to have to say goodbye to you. I'm sorry. Do call again. But yes, he is the president. He does deserve some respect. Right. Well, that's the end of me today. I'm going to be back here on Sunday morning from 10 o'clock. Of course, it's going to be Remembrance Sunday, 100 years since the guns fell silent on the Western Front. I'll be interviewing Jamie Weems, a naval historian and relative of Admiral Sir Roslin Weems, who was in the railway carriage at Compiègne and who signed up for the armistice to be at 11 a.m, despite the fact that Prime Minister David Lloyd George wanted a late